And hello, everybody, and welcome back. This is How I Read a Chart, episode 3. I do want to mention it's not sequential, so you can watch them in any order you like. I'm just going through a couple of charts. The goal of this is, as it says on the screen, a step-by-step look at how I find my way into a natal astrology chart and into the head and heart of the person I am reading. The point being that any computers can do astrology. They can give you a whole list of ticks and traits, but it takes an astrologer's skill to put the person together from all these pieces. And that's really what this is about, is how I found a system that helps me get into a chart step by step and pull a person out of it as I go along. Okay, we're going to do 2 charts today. And the first thing I always do personally, I'm a graphic artist. I redraw the chart. I can't stand all those computer things. So let's see, there we go. This is a chart, and hold on, let me move this out of the way. Okay. This person was born on the 18th of May, 1969 at 1:30 p.m. in Rockledge, Florida. And at first look, I'm looking at this chart. Nothing particularly stands out just yet. There is a stellium in the first house. Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus. That's pretty intense right up front. But other than that, nothing. It's the planets are put around evenly, so there's nothing that really stands out and makes me say this person's, particularly unusual or crazy or whatever it might be. So the first thing I do is, come on. All right, there we go. Okay. I highlight the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. I also added the letter E down at the bottom just to identify it, but don't worry about that. So the first thing I'm noticing is we've got a Taurus with in the sun. We have a Gemini moon, and we have Virgo rising. Now I want to make a quick pause here. The birth time is 1:30 p.m. That always makes me a little bit suspicious because most babies aren't born on the half hour, an hour. And if she was born 10 minutes earlier, she wouldn't be Virgo rising anymore. So I actually saw this person through a Skype, and I found the clue I needed, which is Virgo rising. You always look younger than you are. She's 48 years old. She looks like she's 38. I'm like, okay, I have the correct birth time. So I relaxed about that. Now we have a sun in Taurus. Oh, we all know Taurus: stable, steady, unchanging, stubborn, very focused, very sensual, very into pleasure and sensual pleasure, whether it's eating or sex or music or whatever it might be, that they're enjoying that, and they're very solid and very physically oriented. But the moon, the emotional side, is in Gemini. So there's kind of a buzz going on underneath this person. You have this steady Taurus thing, but the moon is kind of bubbling with this intellectualized emotions. And we go to the rising sign, and we have Virgo rising. So there's a certain proper quality up front. Virgo rising is how you present yourself to the public, and Virgo rising knows the rules and knows how to use them, and can be very charming and cooperative. So that's what I've got so far. So let's add. The next thing I add are any conjunctions to take the next step into the chart. So I circle them in green. You don't have to use these colors. But so the first thing I see, the sun is on the midheaven. Okay, career person, going to be very outside world oriented because the midheaven is the outside world, 10th house cusp. So even though she is a Taurus, it's outside world is going to matter more to her, because down at the bottom, the nadir, the Neptune is conjunct the nadir, and it's going to fuzz up the home completely. On one level, in a healthy way, she could have a very spiritual home and very grounded family in that sense, but it can also be indicating deceit and confusion, and this is the core of who she is. So there's a physical quality out front in the main world, up top with the Taurus, and then there's this very spiritual fog at the bottom of her chart. But let's take a look at that stellium. This is going to have a big influence. You have Pluto conjunct Jupiter, and you have Jupiter conjunct Uranus. Now, I use a 7-degree orb, so I wouldn't normally say Pluto and Uranus are conjunct, but but they are by what I call guilt by association, because they're both conjunct Jupiter, and Jupiter sort of serves as a midpoint. They're all pulled together. So right up front in her first house, she has this intense Plutonian energy. Hold on a second, my cats. I apologize. They're having a fight with each other. Pluto is intense energy right up front. Pluto in the first house, people can be very dominating. People can be very strong-arming almost, except it's in Virgo. She's got this, she's not going to appear strong-armed, but there's going to be something about her that's kind of compelling. It's conjunct Jupiter, which expands that Plutonian energy. I also want to say that I've always seen that when Pluto, transformation, rebirth, is conjunct Jupiter, which is about social issues, higher justice, higher education, you'll find the two of them working together, whether it's a conjunction or a square or a trine, are always going to be involved in social issues in one form or another. They could be a politician, they could be a social worker, but there's something there that wants to get out there. And because it's in Virgo, it obviously wants to heal and perfect whoever they get their hands on. And we add Uranus in here. It's an out of sign conjunction, but it's Uranus, so there's going to be an offbeat quality. Now this is getting a little odd here because you've got this proper Virgo up front with this kind of crazy, intense, dominating energy buzzing right up front in the chart. So we've got the stable Taurus, but this stuff up front, it's Earth, but it's a challenge on some level to anybody that might meet her. So the next thing I do is I add the trines to the thing to see what the positive aspects are. Okay, nice. The sun is now trining this crazy bundle up front. So that's going to soften it a little bit. Her sense of self, her sun, is working very well with being a transformative person, an exuberant, optimistic person, Jupiter in the first house, and also being a radically different, challenging person because Uranus is up there. So we're getting kind of, Uranus trine the sun is bringing sort of certain genius qualities to the person. And I want to stress when I'm talking about genius, I don't think geniuses are really super, super intelligent. What geniuses do is they completely flip the pattern that other people are thinking in. So she's ready to flip the pattern. And what I mean by that is everybody runs around going 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 1 = 2. A genius comes along and says 2 - 1 = 1. And everybody goes, we never saw that before, but it's the same thing turned inside out. That's what geniuses do. They flip things, they change things, and make you look at it a new way. So we're going to see somebody who is a transformative person for other people and expansive and positive and optimistic, but she's going to be turning people upside down and stirring stuff up. And I'm also going to mention Venus in Aries is trining Mars in Sag. That's a nice blend for male and female relationships, okay? Venus is sort of the social schmoozing side of relationships, where Mars tends to be the physical sides, and they're flowing well together. So she gets along with people, men and women. And then the next thing I add in blue is the difficult aspects. And I do want to mention while we're looking at this chart, my clients, I don't normally put Chiron in the chart, but my client requested it, so I put it there. I have nothing against Chiron, I just don't use it as readily as I do the regular planets. So now we've got a little bit of a mess here because that wonderful Taurus trining into that, Taurus sun trining into the bundle up front now has the moon squaring it. So now we've got a whole nother level of disturbance or upset going on. The moon's going to be struggling with Jupiter. Jupiter squaring the moon is going to be over-emotional. That's over-emotional is not the word. Very emotional, okay? Very effusive, very passionate. It's also squaring Pluto, and that's a challenge because a Pluto square moon, you can have a very emotionally dominating person. They can force is a strong word, force people to do what they want to do emotionally. She's got it in conjunct Jupiter. She's got it the Virgo rising. So it's probably, even though it's a square, and may be difficult for her emotionally, she's comfortable with it. The trine to the sun is helping her work this through. The one thing I did mention to her is that you have to be careful, because if you're controlling everybody's emotions, you will miss out on what you can get from other people, because it's always going to be your emotions that are dominant, which she tended to agree with. But we'll keep going with this bundle. The Uranus is squaring the moon also. So now mom is becoming a curious person in this chart, because moon is in Gemini, so mom is a kind of a chatty intellectual mom, but it's squaring Uranus, so mom's going to be weird. Squaring Jupiter, well, there's going to be benefits from mom, but it might be overwhelming benefits, and it's squaring Pluto, so there might be a power battle with mom. So we're beginning to see a bit of challenges in the childhood and in the home. The other thing is going on. Sun is opposite Neptune. Okay, Taurus is now completely confused. An opposition suggests outside things affect you. Neptune is about as non-earthy as you can get, and it's in opposition. So she's going to struggle at first when she's younger with reality, physical reality. She may be deceived. She may have fantasies that get her into trouble. I don't think she's an out and out liar, but there's going to be kind of a confusion and deception. And in particular, in her case, it's home versus career. And I think for her, career in the outside world might be better off than the Neptune unless she gets the Neptune under some sort of control. The great thing about an opposition is you can balance the energies. But when you're young, it usually pulls you in one direction or the other. So she's got that struggle at first. She's got Mercury in Gemini, nice place to have it, in the 10th house, opposite Mars. So now we've got somebody, action versus thought, in opposition. You've got an argumentative person here. Her ideas are going to be more important. She's going to defend her ideas. Mars, action against. She'll be willing to argue and try to prove her point. She's going to be resistant to other people's ideas. So she's got an open mind. Mercury's in Gemini and things are pouring in all the time, but she's going to be kind of beholden to her own ideas and not wanting to just give them up right away. So there's an argumentative quality. Luckily, Mars is going off, trining off to Venus, so she'll probably be able to do it in a positive, kind way, particularly with Virgo rising, but she's still going to be somewhat defensive. And very briefly, Chiron is opposite Uranus, which suggests that disruptions in healing, difficulty healing, outside things happen to her that kind of force her to heal herself. She probably needs to find some way to keep people from injuring her, keep people from upsetting her, but she's able to deal with it. And she too could be a healer by working through unusual circumstances. Taking it back the other way, the healing aspects of Chiron, she could apply Uranian ideas and concepts to this opposition and into healing people. So far, we got an interesting mix of characters here and problems going on and situations going on. So the next thing I do is I add in the minor aspects. Those are quincunxes and sextiles. And here we have Mercury is sextiling Venus. It means in particular that she speaks very well and is able to communicate well. The beauty of Venus is attached to the Mercury and how she speaks. So it's a sextile, but it'll work. It'll flow well. She'll be able to explain herself well. Going the other direction with the sextile at the bottom, Jupiter is sextiling Neptune, and so is Uranus. So now we've got something that shows us we might have some benefits from this Neptune, and there's the way that she can deal with it. Whenever I see difficult aspects, and whenever I look for the escape route, and in this case, it's the sextile away from Neptune that is going to help her deal with that Sun opposite Neptune problem or challenge. And of course, the reason I put in the quincunx, I don't often look at quincunxes if there's a lot going on in the chart, but in this particular chart, the only thing connecting Saturn to the rest of the chart is this quincunx. And that's a challenge because Saturn, she may need Saturn. A quincunx connects two planets with nothing in common. The connection is, so it's almost like they're handcuffed together and one of them speaks Greek and one of them speaks Swahili and they don't know how to communicate with each other, but they're forced to work together. So this can be a challenge, particularly with her dad. Saturn is good indicated there as quincunx in Uranus. She's going to have trouble struggling between the traditional, which is Saturn, represented by Saturn, and the new, which is represented by Uranus. Her Saturn is in Taurus, so it's going to be a lot more stubborn and a lot more grounded. So I'm thinking at first when she's starting out in life, the rigidity will be more important than the flexibility, but that will undoubtedly change. So moving to the next, what I do next is I have categories. Now here's the point where we want to try to sort the person out of the chart. And these are the components: career, relationships, health, family, and finances, that basically cover the 5 things everybody wants to know about their chart. I will say family probably should be family/home, but let it stand for now. So the next thing I do is I take the chart and I write on the chart those 5 words, as you can see here. Upper right is career, below it is relationships, below that is health, on the left side is finances, the bottom is family. And what I do is I write under each of these things in symbols the planetary things that apply to it. And keep in mind, they can double, they can overlap each other. For example, in career, Mars, how we take action, is opposite Mercury. That's going to have an effect on her career. But Mars, which is how we relate physically to other people, opposite Mercury, how we communicate, is going to affect relationships. Mars opposite Mercury is going to affect health because of lung issues and inflammations. It's going to affect family because Mars is in the 4th house and Mercury is in the 10th house. So it can be overlapping. So we're going to take this piece by piece and see what we can pull out of this chart. Okay, bing. Career. Sun is in Taurus in the 10th house. Career is going to be important to her. In her career, she has a moon in Gemini and Mercury in Gemini. And her midheaven is in Gemini. So you've got a lot of chatter going on up there, a lot of Gemini kind of things. So we're looking at writing, communications, talking. The moon in Gemini suggests an empathy going on there. So there's a natural I need to connect to people while she's doing this. So my first thought was maybe teacher. I will say Mars is in Sag, so her actions are going to be very Sagittarian and open-minded, how she takes action. It's opposing Mercury, which on one level, as I said earlier, in Gemini, can be combative and argumentative about their ideas. But it can be something else. I'll get to it in just a second. Her 6th house, her workplace, 10th house is your career, 6th house is where you work, is in Aquarius. So again, there's kind of an offbeat quality here. As it turns out, she's mostly at this point in time a stay-at-home mom, but she teaches yoga. Okay, so Mars in Sagittarius, advanced action, more spiritual action, higher action, and it's opposing Mercury. So she's talking to people and teaching them how to move and how to connect and how to be yoga-like and be spiritual and active at the same time. So I see very clearly this is something she's doing. I also think that she could potentially, at some point down the road, maybe even write a book about something like yoga or whatever and put it out there with all that Mercury up front. So that's a very strong buzzing kind of career quality. There is some trouble in the chart focusing because Mercury, although it's happy in Gemini, is running around like a puppy off a leash because it's constantly thinking and talking and buzzing away. Her mind is very, very active. As a matter of fact, with some of the other things in her chart, I said, I'm sure people don't even realize you're a Taurus at first. And she said they didn't. She said after they get to know her and realize how steady she is, yes. But meanwhile, with all that stuff up front and everything else, they see her as a very active kind of non-Taurian kind of person. But she is a Taurus, don't forget that. Relationship, she's got the 7th house in Pisces, so she needs an empathetic and connective relationship. She's got Venus in Aries, tough place for Venus. Venus wants to relate and hug people and connect, and Aries wants to do it right now, when I want to do it. So there can be something very forceful about it. People with Venus and Aries walk right up to people and say, hi, how you doing? I like you. I want to get to know you. And they can be, almost a little overbearing. Remember, she's got the Pluto in Virgo up front, so they're not going to run away from her. They're going to be like, yes, what do you want? And there's an exuberance up front with the Jupiter. So it feels very comfortable, but they're picking up somebody. It's like, whoa, what is this? Venus in Aries also makes friends very quickly, but it doesn't necessarily get deep because Aries then looks over the shoulder and says, there's somebody else I can get to know, and they may move on very quickly. It's trining Mars. That means she does get along well with men and women, but that Aries Venus can be a little off-putting to people. Emotionally, the moon is in Gemini, so again, when she's connecting emotionally, there's a certain analysis that goes on with her emotions. She doesn't necessarily feel them as freely as she does sort of think her way through her emotions. Pretty normal for any air moon. Keeping on the topic of relationships, we have the North Node that's sort of on the 7th to 8th house cusp. I use very wide blurring lines for the cusps, but 7th and 8th house are both about relationships. And in her case, the sign it's in is in Pisces, and which means she's leaving behind Virgo, she's leaving behind the fussiness and the detail obsession, and it moves her off in the direction of to stop judging and to surrender to service and empathy and open up to other people. So there's this need to become more empathetic, because I see the North Node as the direction you go to grow the most in life. I don't necessarily think it's karma, but it is the direction where you don't know things and you need to go to learn there. And it is an uncomfortable direction, but it's something that she will grow with, and she learns empathy. And now we get into relationships, and sun and moon represent mommy and daddy. You've got the sun trining Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus, and the moon squaring Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus. You've got somebody who on one level has a very comfortable sense of self and awareness. Sun trine Pluto is great for yourself, and Jupiter for self-confidence, excuse me, I was looking for that word. And Uranus gives you a certain freedom and looseness about it. But the emotional side is not so easy for her to connect to. It's probably good that she's a teacher, because she can be not rise above, but be the person that speaks and gives answers and doesn't necessarily have to volunteer her heart or emotions into what she's doing. Next, we have finances and family. Let's start with family, because the family is a bit of a challenge for her when she was growing up. Neptune's conjunct her nadir, and it's opposite the sun. So Neptune's on the nadir, the 4th house cusp. That's mom. It's blurry. It's confusing. Dad is probably a little more relatable to her, but not necessarily a tight connection. What I'm seeing here is the moon is going to be more of an issue. If you look, I have once again, I'm putting the same moon square and sun trine to the Pluto, Jupiter, and Uranus. So the moon square Pluto, power struggles with mom. Moon square Jupiter, benefits from mom, but over the top too much, a little over, because it's a square to Jupiter. Jupiter always overdoes it when it's squaring. And the moon is also squaring Uranus. So mom is a challenge, a disruptor, confusing on some level. The relationship with dad is a little smoother because of the trine to those same 3 planets to the sun. But got to remember, Saturn is quincunx Uranus. Dad is not something she's going to connect to very easily. He's a bit disruptive. She doesn't know how to deal with it because of the quincunx. So dad and mom are not easy. Mars is in her 4th house. So the family is going to be actively combative on some level, very busy, very competitive family life. There's friction there with her parents. There's certainly going to be a rebel against authority with her Uranus up in the 1st house, and then this Mars and Sag in the 4th house. Family, she's going to kind of push against family, both growing up and maybe not so much as she gets older, but there is still going to be an inner quarrelsomeness. When you got Mars down in the core of who you are, the 4th house, the roots of your psyche, you have somebody who has an inner quarrelsomeness that needs to be sort of overcome. And not overcome, but maybe channeled better than necessarily nonstop fighting. Because remember, this same Mars that's quarrelsome down there is also opposing Mercury, so she's going to be defending her ideas. So, and some of that may be defending, there may be, early in her life, she may find herself fighting against the influence that her parents had. She may have moved out and the parents aren't giving her a hard time anymore, but we all know we are programmed to a certain degree by our parents in our childhood, and that's what she may be carrying with her at first. Finances, I'm not too worried about. Sun is in Taurus. You rarely see a broke Taurus. And I also want to mention Venus is in Aries in the 8th house trining Mars. Venus in the 8th house in particular suggests benefits from partners. 8th house is money from others or other people's resources. And she has indeed, she confirmed this for me. She said that because she's been a stay-home mom and at-home mom at this point in her life, and she's had to rely on her husband for the finances, which is done actually fairly well, but she's gotten stuff from outside people. The yoga teaching does not support kids in a house, but he does, and she does this on the side. What's also interesting that the kind of yoga she teaches is Kundalini yoga, which is root chakra yoga, but is also a sexuality combined with it. And gosh, Venus, how you relate to people, is in the 8th house of sex, death, rebirth, and money from others. So, gee, she's teaching Kundalini yoga. Well, the Venus is trining the Mars and Sag. So she's teaching out of her 8th house, so to speak, really kind of primal stuff that goes on there. And, okay, just let me click on this. And the final thing is health. Her health is pretty good. Sun trining Pluto gives you tremendous vitality. Pluto, when it's a harmonious thing, can be like a little nuclear power battery. So it's really giving her a lot of energy and vitality with her sun. Same thing with Jupiter. Jupiter tends to bring beneficial health when it is trining the sun. The biggest issue health-wise in her chart would seem to me would be her Mercury opposite Mars. If she gets caught up in stress and caught up in her nerves, then there could be breathing issues or nerve problems and stress problems with that opposition. I believe any of these that she used to have were probably taken care of with the yoga, because the yoga is actually helping her deal with this stuff. So here we're bringing up the chart again, and just a quick run through some of the other things. Mom, it's funny, Moon in Gemini, I'm going to say Mom in Gemini, Moon in Gemini suggests an intellectual relationship with your mom, like not necessarily a gushy, warm one. Well, we also know mom can be a bit of a pain with the square. But she found as that she got to adulthood, her mom became kind of sister-like, friend-like. It was no more the mom power struggle, but they're able to talk to each other and communicate better. So she does bring about that Moon in Gemini full cycle. I also want to mention Saturn in the 9th house. With Saturn in the 9th house, particularly with it in Taurus, she's got the risk of being very rigid at her early spirituality, and she acknowledged as much. As she got older, she opened up. Saturn always gets better with age. And what else do I want to get to? Oh, yes, Saturn in Taurus is also, to quote Isabel Hickey, the test there is the test of ownership and materialism. And I know she's a Taurus, and she probably loves her stuff, but there's a lot in her chart indicating that the more she holds on to stuff, the more of a problem. And as Isabel Hickey says, I have to attribute this to her, she said, the more you stop needing stuff and you sort of let go of your desire, then that you no longer fear loss. Well, this woman has let go of a lot of stuff. She's a yoga teacher. She's very new agey. And she's dealing with this stuff fairly well. She's still got some ways to go, but she's dealing pretty well with it. So in 28 to 29 minutes, that is how I look at that chart. And if anybody wants to ask a few questions right now, fire away. Otherwise, we'll go to the next chart. So going once, going twice. No questions? Okay. Chart number 2. Oh, we got to get past all this stuff. Okay, how I read a chart. This person was born on the 14th of January, 1954 at 12:04 p.m. In this particular case, I know the chart's rectified, so I know the birth time is accurate. As a matter of fact, I know the rectification was actually the 12:03 and 58 seconds. So no, a Virgo didn't do it, but yes, they could have. So what we have here right off the bat, nothing particularly stands out. There's a stellium up top, but the planets are kind of scattered around, and nothing makes me scream one thing or the other. So the first thing I do is I highlight the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. And we've got some real earthiness here. We've got a sun in Capricorn, a moon in Taurus, and Taurus rising. And so this person is very earthy. It appears at first glance. This person is very earthy and very grounded, and probably a bit controlling and a bit overly orderly maybe, because the sun is in Capricorn, and even though the Taurus is there, the Capricorn sun is probably going to want some kind of control. So the next thing I do is I highlight the conjunctions. And I'm very fond of conjunctions to the angles because I find the angles to be very powerful, which is the ascendant, descendant, and the midheaven and nadir. And in this case, this guy has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets on the angles and the North Node. So we've got a lot of kind of highlighted planets here. So let's take a look. We have the Sun conjunct Mercury. Not only is it conjunct Mercury, it's 2358 to 24:1. These two are 3 minutes apart. I believe the term is Kazemi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. This is the term when the 2 planets are so close. As Isabel Hickey puts it, they combust, they burn into each other. This person's mind, his Mercury, is completely connected to his sense of self. And so people like this think a lot and also think about themselves a lot because the planet is so close to the sun. And it's also conjunct Venus, and Venus will bring a lot of beauty to the Mercury. So you have somebody who is very well-spoken, even to the point of being perhaps silver-tongued, you know. And it's in Capricorn, a somewhat manipulative sign, both for better or for worse. So you have somebody that's quite capable in this configuration of being extremely charming and pulling stuff off, because Capricorn, they know the rules and they know how to do it when they have to. At the bottom of the chart, this person has Uranus conjunct the nadir. So now we have, and it's in Cancer. So now we have a disruptive childhood and a disruptive home in some way, shape, or form. Surprises pop in, surprises pop out. Things don't quite settle in that well when you have Uranus on the nadir. And a deep unsettled quality inside this person. Anything conjunct the nadir is an inner quality that manifests in childhood as what you can't get away from because you're a kid, and then you take it with you and you grow up and you try to find a way to make that planet function in a positive way. And the other conjunction is Mars is conjunct Saturn on top of the descendant. And even though they're a bit wide, it's about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, almost 7, a little over 7 degrees, they're brought together by their both being on the descendant. Mars is in Scorpio. It's very happy in Scorpio. It's conjunct Jupiter. And now we have the Saturn. So now we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, which is action versus immovable qualities. So you have, when they work together, Saturn and Mars is very focused action. Saturn focuses the Mars, and Mars keeps the Saturn from stagnating. When they don't work that well together, you can have a stop-start, or you can have somebody that ends up spinning their wheels. So the Mars is spinning around, and Saturn's saying, we ain't going nowhere. All this is sitting atop his descendant. He's going to bring this to his relationships, along with that charm up top. Okay? So that covers some of the basic conjunctions. And the next thing I do is I add in the positive harmonious aspects. And right off the bat, we have Sun trine Moon, which is really a wonderful harmonious connection. Sun is your sense of self in a way, your outer self, and the Moon is your inner self. When they're harmonious, your inner and outer self are working well together, so you have a fairly confident person. That doesn't mean they're always right, by the way. It just means they're confident. They feel comfortable in what they're choosing to do. Also, interestingly enough, again, Isabel Hickey, I don't know why she's coming to mind so much today, but she says a harmonious Sun and Moon have to come from a harmonious conception. And so she says the mother and father that spawned this person were in harmony when this person was conceived. Doesn't mean they stayed there, but they were in harmony when they were conceived. And this person, ironically, was the third child. They planned on having 2. There was a gap of a few years, and they were surprised, and they referred to him as their love child. So there you go. And I have spoken to other people with Sun trine Moon, and generally, mom and dad were very connected when these people are conceived. His Moon is also trining Mercury and not quite trining Venus, but it is trining Mercury. So he's somebody that probably is fairly adept at speaking his emotions. The big joke in him is he's a Capricorn. He doesn't want to share his emotions, but he can. And hey, the Moon's in the first house. He may think he's hiding his emotions, but the Moon's on his sleeve. The heart's on his sleeve. It's in the first house. He's only fooling himself. Everybody knows what he's feeling. He thinks he's hiding it because he's a Capricorn and he wants to hide it. And finally, trine-wise, we have Uranus at 20 degrees, and it's trining Mars. So when this person takes action, it may be unusual action, it may be unexpected action, but it probably flows fairly well because Mars will want to go forward, Uranus will want to go forward in a strange new way, but they're going to work harmoniously together. So the unusual things he brings along will be manifested in a decent way. So let us see what kind of difficult and challenging aspects he has. Oh boy. T-square, okay. The Sun and Mercury and Venus are opposing Uranus, and they are squaring Neptune. Okay. You probably cannot find two planets that are less interested in Capricorn energy than Uranus and Neptune, because Uranus is about the spiritual world. It's not about the physical world. And excuse me, Neptune is about the spirit. I hope I said that right. The spiritual world, not the physical world. Uranus is about surprises, freedom, unexpected changes. And Capricorn is trying so hard to be controlling and hold everything down. And it's not going to work for this guy. Okay. He may get into that whole Capricorn thing up top. He's even got his North Node in Capricorn. And he has to learn to be Capricorn on top of being Capricorn. But Uranus is in opposition. It's opposite his Venus, so other people are going to upset him, or he's going to upset other people. And his thoughts will be unusual and upsetting and confusing, and he'll take outside influences upsetting him. People with Uranus opposite Venus are very attracted to weirdos and odd people, Uranian people. Not always the best choices. If it was a trine, I could say this guy meet weird people, he'll be fine. But the opposition suggests that not everybody he's going to draw into his orbit is going to be a good idea to have that person in your life. And Neptune is squaring in there. So this is a real challenge now, because Capricorn wants concrete results, and Neptune's sitting there going like, whatever, man, it's all real. And it's coming from the sixth house of work. So you got somebody who's going to be a real Capricorn in the job, but the workplace is going to be very Neptunian, and he's going to be very Uranian on some level. So my first thought about, well, we'll get to career later. Okay, I don't want to get carried away here. Square. Saturn is squaring Pluto, so we have somebody who is going to be fairly dominated in some way emotionally. It's the same thing in the last chart. There's an emotional domination here. This guy, again, like the previous person, is charming. So he may be he will probably dominate people by massaging them, by seducing them isn't quite the right word, but that Venus charm is going to come through, and he's going to convince people to do what he wants them to do through charm, and he's going to make them think it's their idea. Probably he's going to make it seem like, hey, that was a good idea I came up with, and he'll just sit there and go, yes, because that's Capricorn behind the scenes. Also going to have trouble with his mom there. Moon square Pluto is always a bit of mom troubles and home troubles. So let's take it a little further. And I add the minor aspects, and he's got Neptune sextile Pluto, but almost everybody for the past 60 years has got Neptune sextile Pluto, so it's not a major thing to really get into. What's more interesting in his chart is he's got a couple of quincunxes. One is from Jupiter to Mars, and up to this point, Jupiter's been completely unaspected, so now it's getting dragged into the chart. And so Jupiter is struggling to take action. So his ability to expand, Jupiter, is locked in with Mars taking action, but they don't communicate well. That's that quincunx thing. One's speaking Chinese, one's speaking Turkish. So there's a struggle to be able to expand and grow, and it's in his second house. It's a struggle to hold on to money. Jupiter will bring in the money. Gemini will send it right back out the door again. Okay, so these are the couples. And the other thing is the Pluto is at 24 degrees, almost precisely quincunxing the Sun and Mercury. So he's going to have trouble transforming and growing, because he's already all at Earth, so he's not exactly quick to change with the Taurus moon and the Capricorn. But the quincunx from the Sun to Pluto is suggesting that the ability to adapt and grow is going to be resistant on his part and going to have trouble speaking to each other. As I mentioned, the quincunx is about the inability of those two particular planets to connect in a clear way, but they are handcuffed together. Okay. And we will go back to our 5 topics: career, relationships, family, health, family, home, and finances. So bingo, there they are. Really quickly, what time we got here? Okay, let's have a little bit of time here. The career is obviously very important to this person. You got 3 planets in the North Node up there sitting on the midheaven, and as a matter of fact, Mercury is directly on the midheaven. So you've got somebody who wants to be a leader, who wants to be in charge of wherever he is. His Mercury is very important, so there's a possibility of writing or communication is an important part of what he does. Relating to people is an important part of what he does. Venus is up there too. It can be Venus is relating to people. Venus can also be about beauty and art. So writing, beauty, in charge of things. Let's go back down to the bottom, Uranus. He's got to be disruptive in some way. He's got to be unusual, unexpected qualities to his career. And then we square into Neptune, and now the career is kind of fuzzy, but it connects. Venus and Neptune understand each other. So I'm looking at a creative career of some kind, an artist, a musician, something along those lines, but not a particularly traditional artist and musician, because that Uranus thing is just kind of blowing it up from the bottom. So anything he's going to come up with is going to be unusual, somewhat disruptive. And if you look up top where the career thing is in the upper right, he also has Mars conjunct Saturn in Scorpio. Well, that gives him his focused energy when he's actually doing something, but it's in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio never does anything that it isn't emotionally invested in. So anything this person's doing for a career and work has to be something he cares about. This is not an accountant. Well, I don't insult accountants. This is not a person that does the same job every day, day to day, that has no emotional content whatsoever. Which again leads us back into the whole idea of a creative life of some kind. But and in charge. But this is no longer appearing to be a typical Capricorn. Okay, the Capricorn energies are always going to be there. Don't be fooled the same way with the previous chart. She didn't seem very Taurus-like. He may not seem very Capricorn-like at first. The sun will always come through. I don't care what else is going on in the chart. This guy's going to be a Capricorn. He's going to find a new way to be a controlling authority, but it may not be, he's not going to be a captain of industry like a banker or the old stereotypes that go with Capricorn. Relationships, again, upper left, we have Mars and Saturn in Scorpio, a fairly passionate person in a relationship. Trining Uranus. My big concern about Saturn conjunct the descendant is you have somebody who could be very limiting to his partner, but Mars suggests a certain combativeness too. It's very passionately felt. I know traditionally Saturn on the descendant or in the 7th house indicates a better to wait to get married. It's not that you have to be delayed, but it does suggest that you need a certain maturity to get married. So if this person gets married younger in life, it probably either will not work out or will have to undergo a lot of renovation as his life goes on to make that relationship work. As long as we also have Venus opposite Uranus, Venus in Capricorn opposite Uranus squaring Neptune. Well, Venus in Capricorn is always looking for a solid, established relationship. Tradition says an older person, but older in modern terms means someone that knows what they're doing and has matured. So it doesn't have to be an older person, but it has to be sort of a grounded, mature person on some way, shape, or form. But he's probably a little idealistic about this romance stuff because he's got it squaring what? Neptune, and he's also got it opposing Uranus, and that's a tight one. It's 2021 and 2056 from Venus to Uranus, respectively. So unusual relationships that he's very idealistic about. But let's just throw in, there's that Pluto squaring the moon. He's going to want to be in control of it, but that Capricorn is going to go nuts. I got to control this relationship. But he's a Capricorn. He's going to be subtle about it. And I know for a fact his first marriage lasted 2 years. He was 25 when he got married, so that much was true. He did have issues with that. But he has Sun trine Moon, so he's grounded and he's connected, but and feeling very confident to himself. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the other person or the partner. But the moon is in Taurus, and that's kind of a stable place. So people are going to feel comfortable around him. Taurus rising, And people love Taurus rising because it's like, it's safe here. You know, Taurus rising is not going to get up and storm around and scream and rant and rave, because their Taurus energy wants to sit and be comfortable. So there's a comfort quality to this guy. And so when you first meet him, you're going to feel very comfortable with him, and he's going to have all this Capricorn stuff going on behind the scenes. Okay. Rolling down on the right side, we have health. There's not a lot indicating health here, but there is Neptune in the 6th house. Always good with Neptune in the 6th house to consider natural healing techniques. I never suggest a person with Neptune in the 6th house doesn't go to doctors. However, I do suggest that for these people, I mean everybody, but I believe for these people in particular, doctors are only half the equation. Medicine is only half the equation. You've got to find the spiritual reason for your illness. You've got to make the spiritual connection. Otherwise, this person will just be treating symptoms. By the same token, with Neptune in the 6th house, sometimes things can be hard to diagnose disease-wise, because Neptune's being kind of fuzzy there. What's wrong with him? Is it this? No, it's this. No, wait, it's this over here. So that can be a challenge. And when he goes off the spiritual path, when he's heading the wrong direction, more often than not, Neptune will bring some illness of some kind that will kind of force him to pay attention to it if he's willing to. Okay. Also, Mars is trining Uranus. There's actually kind of a nice health quality there, but it is very spiritually oriented. He has to be careful of that. Go down to the bottom, we have family and home. So he has Uranus in Cancer on the nadir, and so his childhood home was disruptive. His adult home is probably disruptive, possibly messy. Uranus can be something like a really disruptive situation, like an unusual home. You could be living in a very strange place. You could be very chaotic and be very messy, and the entire apartment is kind of all over the place, or home. And he does have, as long as we're talking about family and home, he's got Pluto squaring Moon, so mom is an issue. But he has Sun trining Moon, so there's this. He saw his mother and his father as harmonious with each other. That's the other thing too. Sun is dad, Moon is mom. They're harmonious with each other in his eyes. Even if he has issues with domination issues and control issues with his mom. He was his mother's favorite child. And they got along very well, but there are always issues of control between the two of them. Dad was around, but they were both alcoholics. So you're having this issue of disruption from the home. In his case, it came from his parents, who were very loving to him, except that they drank. They were not abusive in that sense, but they drank, and therefore only one parent showed up at the I remember high school graduation, and none of his parents showed up at his college graduation. And where he graduated from was the School of Visual Arts, because career-wise, he became a graphic artist and a designer. He started by trying to be an illustrator, but as I remember correctly, he told me he had problems trying to sell his artwork because the cartoony people thought he was too serious, and the serious illustrating people thought he was too cartoony. So you're having now the Venus opposite Uranus, unusual art that for some reason is not quite fitting in anywhere, squaring into this Neptune thing. He ended up becoming a graphic designer and an art director. So now you've got that Capricorn. He's in charge of the look of the magazine. He's in charge of the look of everything. And yet he's doing it, and he's being very creative as he does it. Career-wise, the other possibility is, working with people along with beauty and art. Venus is in his midheaven with the square to Neptune and Uranus. And when he hit his Saturn return, he started studying astrology, and he became an astrologer. And he had two careers at the same time. Both of these careers fulfilled the what you see here, the Capricorn in charge, Venus relating to other people, the Uranian opposition from the other side, because astrologers will upset other people, and possibly in a good way, but they're there to sort of disrupt you a bit and make you see things differently. And it's squaring Neptune, and that's the spiritual side of it all. So he is actually an astrologer and a graphic designer at the same time, and is to this day, which we took off from family, went back there. Finances, I mentioned earlier, Jupiter brings money in the second house, but it's in Gemini and it goes right back out. And he struggles with that quincunx and that Jupiter is retrograde. In his particular career, his graphic arts career, he was often called in to fix jobs that were screwed up by other art directors. So there's the retrograde in action in Gemini. He worked on magazines, so it was in publishing, and yet a lot of the work he did was fixing things that had been wounded in some way or weren't working properly, and that was what he had to do for a lot of career work. He still was paid just as well as anybody else, but he didn't personally get a chance always to put his stamp on things design-wise, which you see there's that Uranian opposition that kind of not quite connecting, not quite fitting in wherever he is due to the Uranian opposition. So I believe that is that. I didn't go through these, but these were just close-ups of what we just discussed. And that's my card. We have a few minutes. Are there any questions? Any of interest to going to anybody? Hello?
We're all still here. Give us a moment to think up some questions.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure I hadn't accidentally disconnected myself or anything.
That's okay.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is your, do you look at the South Node any?
Yes, I do. I mean, I'm aware of it being there. And is it a particular chart you want to talk about, or just about the South Node?
Just about the South Node, and how do you approach it, if you approach it at all?
Yeah, I do, in the sense that the South Node is what you already know to me. I consider it, I tell people, like, we're all comfortable in our South Node. We know all this stuff. This person's South Node happens to be at his nadir, the last one I was talking about, and as much as he needs to be out in the public world because his North Node is up there, he's a freelancer and he's very happy staying at home for weeks on end and working from home because he'd rather be there where he's comfortable. South Node is where you're comfortable. South Node is where you know what you're doing. As a matter of fact, it was kind of funny. The first chart, her South Node, let me go back to the first chart. Her South Node was in Virgo in her first house, because her North Node is in Pisces in the 7th house. And she actually turned to me during the reading and she said, well, what about Virgo? What do I have to do with the South Node? And I said, you already know how to Virgo. That's your South Node. You don't have to try to Virgo. Your Virgo rising, and Virgo is in your first house, and it's your South Node. In her case, it's conjunct Jupiter. She's got no problem with the stuff she knows. She knows how to do detail work. It comes naturally to her. For her, the issue is to get away from the details and move into the North Node area. So the South Node can be your toolbox. It's stuff you know very well. I know traditional astrology, some people feel that the North Node is your next life, or your karma for this life, and the South Node is your past life. And I'm not arguing with that. I think that's a possibility too, but I try to sort of smooth it out. Not everybody that comes to me wants to talk about past lives or even believes in them. So I'd rather use that this is something you already know, and this is something where you grow, and it helps them understand better. So South Node is something you're comfortable with. It's very easy to go slumming to your South Node instead of going where you should be to learn and grow, because it's just you're hanging out, you're comfortable. Well, yeah, I don't want to leave the South Node. You know, it's where things are all easy. Does that help? Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, it does. And since you brought up the first chart, because my mind was on that and I kind of forgot about it, since there are planets conjunct the South Node, does that not hold any additional weight for you as far as well, the issues of those planets having to be readdressed?
Yeah, that's exactly what it comes down to, because it's obviously very strong in her chart in this first one. It's all up in the first house, but her goal is to go to the 7th house. So in this case, I would look at that. It's conjunct her Jupiter, which expands those South Node skills. But ultimately, Pluto conjunct Jupiter in this particular case is about transforming social issues in many levels. I knew a woman who started her own social work company, and it was, again, she had the Pluto-Jupiter conjunction. So on one level, it would be, if she works in this direction, very easy for her to turn it back up to the North Node, because she's interested in social issues and transforming the world. Well, you better be able to be empathetic and serve the world as opposed to serve your own ego. So get away from the details and see the bigger picture is what I see going on in this chart. But yeah, the planets down there might make it more comfortable to hang out down there because you've got friends down there now. Okay. And they understand your south node and they're like, yeah, we know, we'd rather be here. But I would say this, the second person whose north node is supported, so to speak, by his sun and Mercury and Venus, struggles tremendously to be public. He does it, he feels better afterwards, but it's very difficult to go there, even with those planets helping him. So the north node is always an uncomfortable direction. That's how you grow. You grow by being uncomfortable. If we were comfortable, we wouldn't, well, why would we change anything? We're comfortable, you know. So anybody else? Curiosity, questions about anything in particular?
Hi, thank you. I have a question.
Fire away.
I was just curious as what is your orb for Cazimi?
Well, 1 degree and less is where it starts. When you're getting really close, like that second chart where there's 3 minutes apart, it's absolutely deadly Cazimi. I would say by the time you're getting like 30 minutes away or less, you're probably really getting intense. But Hickey talks about a 1 degree orb, but I would, if it's when it's as tight as the second chart, it's volatile. I mean, it's that close. So that's what I look at is for Cazimi is 1 degree.
Thank you. Could you explain a little bit more about how that actually, like, so does it mean you lose the qualities of the planet, or?
You lose the individuality. I mean, conjunctions in general kind of mush planets together.
Yeah.
But a Cazimi, it's almost like it's not the sun and Mercury in that particular chart. It's sun Mercury. You know, it's one thing. And so therefore in that particular chart, his thinking is utterly tied up in his sense of self. It's very difficult for him to step outside himself and clearly see things intellectually because it's connected. And that's why I mentioned he's always thinking about himself because it's just merged into who he is. And he's people with sun conjunct Mercury and a Cazimi kind of thing are often completely obsessed with their own ideas. They can think and amuse themselves for hours is a good way to put it. So
thank you. You explained a mystery to me for thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, any final questions?
I do want to say one quick thing while you're thinking about this. What I've done here has been inspired by Stephen Forrest in The Inner Sky. I've taken it much further, but the way I walk through the chart and bring stuff out has been very much inspired by what I first learned from Stephen Forrest years ago. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Okay.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you, Anthony. That was very interesting as usual. And thank you from all of us, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, I'll rack up as many of these as you like. I enjoy doing them tremendously. So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Great.
Good night, all.
Thank you. Learned a lot.
Thank you.